Hello, my friend. Thank you for coming back and sitting with me today. There is something strange about friendship. When life is going well, there are often many people around us. People to have dinner with, people to laugh with in photographs, people who send a message when we have good news, people who say, we should get together soon. And maybe they mean it. But then, at some point in life, something inside our world begins to fall apart. A job is lost. A marriage breaks. A house becomes too quiet. A doctor gives news no one was ready to hear. A long season begins where we do not know how to tell anyone that we say are not okay. And that is when we begin to learn something. Not everyone knows how to stay beside another person's pain. Not because they are bad. Not because they do not care. Pain makes many people uncomfortable. They do not know what to say. They do not know how to help. They do not know whether they should call. So they become quiet, and life carries them forward. But sometimes there is one person who does not leave. They do not say anything perfect. They do not fix everything. They do not make the pain disappear. They simply show up. Knock on the door. Bring a container of soup. Sit down in the chair beside us and say, I'm here. Today I want to tell you about a man named Andrew. Andrew had many people in his life. Co-workers, neighbors, friends from church. People who would have called him a good man. But when his life entered its darkest season, the person who stayed beside him was not the person who said the most. It was an old friend named Mark. A man who did not try to be a hero. He simply refused to leave. Andrew Miller was 49 years old. He lived in a small town in Michigan. The kind of place with long roads, cold winters, and lakes that froze over in January. Andrew had always been an easy man to like. Not flashy, not rich. Not the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone turn around. But he had a warmth that made people feel comfortable. He remembered people's names, asked about the neighbors' children, held the door for whoever was behind him, brought cookies to church meetings. If someone needed help fixing a fence, Andrew showed up. If a friend's car would not start, he drove over with jumper cables. Andrew had worked as a manager at a hardware store for more than 15 years. It was not a glamorous job. But he knew every aisle in the store. He knew which paint worked best on damp walls. He knew which older customers needed help carrying things to their cars. He knew which new employees were nervous during their first week. He had a wife named Rachel and a 16-year-old son named Ben. Andrew's life was not perfect, but it was steady. There were family dinners, Ben's basketball games on weekends, quiet evenings when Andrew and Rachel sat on the back porch, each holding a cup of tea, watching the lights in the neighborhood come on, one by one. When people asked Andrew how he was doing, he usually smiled and said, "Can't complain." And at the time, he meant it. Mark Peterson had been Andrew's friend since high school. The two men were not very much alike. Andrew was quieter. Mark was funnier. Andrew thought for a while before he spoke. Mark spoke first and thought later. Andrew liked gardening, fixing things, and quiet afternoons. Mark liked telling stories, watching baseball, and arguing about things no one had asked him to explain. They met in 10th grade, when both of them were placed in summer history class. After failing a final exam, Mark sat behind Andrew. On the first day, he poked Andrew in the back with a pencil and whispered, "Do you know anything about the Civil War?" Andrew turned around and said, "Not enough to avoid this class." Mark laughed so loudly the teacher had to stop him. That was how the friendship began. It was not the kind of friendship built on deep conversations. Most of their teenage years were made of cheap pizza, basketball at the school court, and driving around town because there was nothing else to do. After graduation, life pulled them in different directions for a while. Andrew married young. Mark moved to Detroit for a few years, then came back. There were seasons when they did not see each other often. Sometimes months passed between real conversations, but the friendship never disappeared. It simply became quieter. The kind of friendship where you do not have to explain yourself too much. The kind where someone can still call you by an old nickname and remind you that before you were a husband, a wife, an employee, a grown man with responsibilities, you were once a 17-year-old kid sitting in an old car, eating cold pizza, believing life would always be long. Things began to change one autumn. Not all at once. At first, it was only a few small things happening at the same time. The hardware store where Andrew worked was bought by a large corporation. A new regional manager came in. Then came the changes. Different schedules, staff cuts, new systems, new numbers, meetings where Andrew felt as if everyone was speaking a language he did not quite understand. He tried to adapt. He really did. But after 15 years of doing a job through experience, through knowing people, through patience and common sense, everything was suddenly measured by dashboards, speed, efficiency, and numbers on a screen. One afternoon in November, Andrew was called into the office. The regional manager was sitting there with someone from Human Resources. There was a folder on the desk. As soon as Andrew saw it, he knew. They used polite words. Restructuring. Difficult decision. Not a reflection of your personal value. We're grateful for your years of service. Andrew nodded, listened, signed a few papers, received an envelope, then walked out of the store carrying a small box of things from his desk. An old coffee mug, a family photograph, a notebook, a pen Ben had given him for Father's Day. In the parking lot, the cold wind moved across the pavement. Andrew stood beside his car for a long time. He did not cry. He did not call anyone. He just stood there, with one hand resting on the roof of the car, looking back at the store he had walked into almost every day for 15 years. Then he drove home. Rachel knew something was wrong as soon as Andrew walked in. He placed the box on the kitchen table. He did not have to say much. She understood. "Oh, Andrew." He tried to smile. "I'm okay." Rachel hugged him. Andrew stood still in his wife's arms, his body stiff. As if he relaxed even a little, something inside him would fall apart. That evening they talked to Ben. Andrew tried to keep his voice steady. "The company made some changes. I'll find something else." Ben asked, "Are we going to be okay?" Andrew answered immediately, "Yes. Don't worry about that." Rachel looked at him. She knew he was not sure, but she also knew that, in that moment, he needed to say it. During the first few weeks, people were kind. News travels quickly in a small town. Some former co-workers sent messages. "That's terrible. You didn't deserve that. We should get coffee soon. Let me know if you need anything." People at church patted his shoulder. "God will open another door." Neighbors asked, "You doing all right?" Andrew always answered, "Yeah, I'm looking." And in the beginning, he really believed he would be fine. He updated his resume, sent applications, called people he knew, went to interviews. But in a small town, there were not many opportunities. Some jobs paid far less. Some required skills he did not have. Some went to younger applicants. 1 month passed, then 2. Then winter arrived. Winter in Michigan can make sadness feel heavier. It gets dark early. Snow covers the yard. Wind moves through the cracks of old windows. One day begins to look like the next. Andrew started waking up later. Not very late, just later than before. He wore the same sweatshirt for several days. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, searching for jobs, sending applications, waiting for emails. Most of the time, nothing came. Some emails were automatic. Thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, he began to hate the word unfortunately. Rachel went to work at the town library. Ben went to school. The house stayed quiet for hours. Andrew began avoiding people, not because he did not want to see Owen, but because he did not want to answer the same question again. Any news on the job front? He knew people asked because they cared, but every time he had to say, "Not yet," he felt himself become a little smaller. Mark called him in early December. "What are you doing?" Andrew looked at his laptop. "Nothing." "Want to grab lunch?" "Can't. I'm busy." "Busy doing what?" "Looking for work." Mark was quiet for 1 second. People who look for work still have to eat. Andrews gave him a laugh. "Another day." "All right, another day." Mark did not push. But 2 days later, he called again. "Is it another day yet?" Andrew looked at the phone. He did not want to answer, but he did. "Mark, I'm at Miller's Diner. I already ordered you a sandwich." "I didn't say I was coming." "I know. That's why I'll bring it to your house if you don't come here." Andrew sighed. "You're annoying." "That is one of my strengths." Andrew did not want to smile, but he did. And 15 minutes later, he put on his coat and drove to the diner. Mark was sitting at a table by the window. In front of him were 2 cups of coffee, a sandwich, and a plate of Freezies. He lifted a hand. "Look at that. The missing man has been found." Andrew sat down. "Don't make a thing out of it." "I'm not making a thing. This is me showing restraint." Andrew shook his head. For the first few minutes, they talked about ordinary things. The weather, the Detroit Tigers, someone they knew from high school who had opened an auto repair shop. Mark did not ask right away about work. He did not ask if Andrew was okay. He did not say, "Everything happens for a reason." He only pushed the sandwich toward him. "Eat. You look like a coat with a beard." Andrew laughed. This time, he really laughed. After lunch, when the coffee had gone cold, Mark finally said, "You don't have to pretend with me." Andrew looked out the window. Light snow was falling. "I'm not pretending." Mark said nothing. Andrews continued, "I just don't know what to say." Mark nodded. "Then don't say anything." So they sat quietly for a while, in a small diner, with spoons tapping against mugs. A waitress asking if they wanted more coffee, wind moving against the door. And for the first time in weeks, Andrew did not feel like he had to prove he was all right. But things did not get better quickly, the way people sometimes say they will. January came. Then February. Andrew still had not found work. Their savings began to shrink. Rachel picked up a few extra hours at the library. Ben stopped mentioning the spring basketball trip because he knew money was tight. Andrew noticed, and it hurt him. At home, the tension started to show. Not in big arguments, just in shorter sentences, longer silences. Rachel tried to be strong. Andrew tried not to look scared. Ben tried to pretend he did not hear his parents talking quietly in the kitchen. One evening, the health insurance bill arrived. Andrew looked at the number, then set the paper down on the table. "We'll figure it out." Rachel said, "I know." But her voice was tired. Andrew heard it. And because he felt ashamed, he became sharp. "You say that like you don't believe me." Rachel looked at him. "I didn't say that. But you think it." "Andrew, I'm scared too." That sentence made them both quiet. Ben, standing in the hallway, heard it, then went back to his room without a sound. That night, Andrew slept on the sofa. Not because Rachel had asked him to, but because he could not bear the feeling of wasting thoughts beside the woman he loved, and not knowing how to stop making her worry. The next day, Andrew did not leave the house. He did not answer the phone. He did not open the laptop. He did not eat breakfast. He sat in the living room, watching snow fall outside the window. His phone buzzed a few times. A message from Mark. Lunch? Andrew did not answer. An hour later, coffee? No answer. Late afternoon, Olive? Andrew looked at the message. He could not smile. He set the phone down. Around 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Rachel was working late. Ben was upstairs. Andrew did not get up. The knock came again. Then Mark's voice outside the door. I know you're in there. Your car is here. And I brought chili, so if you don't open the door, it's going to get cold. Andrew closed his eyes. Go home, Mark. No. I don't want to see anyone. Good. I'm not anyone. I'm me. Andrew did not want to open the door. But Mark kept standing there. He did not knock over and over. He did not shout. He just waited. Finally, Andrew stood up. He opened the door. Mark was on the porch in a knit hat, holding a large container of food. His nose was red from the cold. You look terrible, Mark said. Andrew replied, Thank you. You're welcome. Mark stepped inside, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He put the chili on the kitchen table, then took bowls out of the cabinet. He knew exactly where the bowls were, because he had been in Andrew's house hundreds of times over the years. Andrew stood in the kitchen doorway. You don't have to do this. Mark did not turn around. I know. Then why are you doing it? Mark spooned chili into a bowl. Because you did it for me. Andrew frowned. When? Mark looked at him. When Lisa left me in 2009. You drove to my house 3 nights in a row with terrible pizza and said almost nothing. Andrew was quiet. He had almost forgotten. Mark said, Friends don't need to be original. We just repeat the good things that once saved us. Andrew looked down. Something in his throat tightened. That night, Mark sat with Andrew in the kitchen. 2 bowls of chili. 2 cans of fada. No speech. No, stay strong. Mark only asked, Today was bad, huh? Andrew gave a dry laugh. You're very perceptive. Yes, I'm basically a detective. Andrew looked into his bowl. Then suddenly he said, I feel like a failure. Mark did not answer right away. Andrew continued, I'm 49 years old. I don't have a job. Savings are going down. Rachel is picking up more hours. Ben won't ask for anything. I go outside and everyone asks, Any news yet? Like my whole life is a job search bulletin board. His voice cracked a little. I used to know who I was. Now I don't. Mark sat still. He did not interrupt. He did not correct him. He did not say Andrew was wrong to feel that way. He simply let his friend speak. Andrew covered his face with one hand. I don't know what to do anymore. Mark set down his soda, then said slowly, I don't know how to fix this for you. Andrew laughed sadly. Thanks, very helpful. But I can sit here. Andrew looked at him. Mark continued, Tonight, tomorrow, next week, as long as it takes. I can sit here with you until you remember you are more than the job you lost. Andrew said nothing. He only looked down at the table. Then tears fell. Not many, not loudly, just a few tears from a man who had been holding himself together for too long. Mark did not look away. He did not make it a big moment. He just stayed there, as if Andrew's pain did not frighten him. And sometimes that is one of the greatest gifts a friend can give us, not being afraid of our pain. After that, Mark kept showing up. Not every day, not so often that Andrew felt watched, but steadily. On Tuesday, he texted, Walk. Andrew answered, Caused. Mark replied, That is a feature of winter. Andrew did not want to go. But Mark arrived with 2 hot coffees. They walked around the neighborhood for 15 minutes. They did not say much. On Friday, Mark stopped by with a list of 3 places that were hiring. He did not say, "You need to apply right now." He only said, "I saw these. They may not be right, but I'm leaving them here." On Sunday, Mark sat beside Andrew at church. He did not ask why Andrew was not singing. He did not ask why he looked tired. He just sat beside him. One afternoon, Mark invited Andrew to his garage to help with his old pickup truck. "What do you need help with?" Andrew asked. "Nothing. I need you to stand there and tell me I'm doing it wrong." "You are always doing it wrong." "Exactly. Your role is very important." In the garage, Andrew held the flashlight. Mark leaned under the hood. The smell of oil. An old radio playing in the corner. Cold air coming through the crack under the garage door. And in that moment, Andrew felt a small part of himself return. Not because he had a job, not because everything was okay, but because there was a place where he did not have to be the unemployed man. He was just Andrew, Mark's friend, the man who knew how to hold the flashlight in the right place and criticize properly. Sometimes a person's dignity does not return through a great victory. Sometimes it returns in one small moment where they are treated like themselves, not like their problem. In March, Andrew received an invitation for an interview. It was a warehouse manager position for a family-owned company, 40 minutes from home. Not a dream job. Less money than before. But it seemed decent. The owner, an older man named Frank, still liked meeting applicants in person instead of only reading resumes online. Andrew prepared carefully. He wore a white shirt, put on a tie, printed his resume. Rachel adjusted his collar at the door. "You look good," Andrew said. "I look like I'm trying to look good." Rachel smiled. "Sometimes that's enough." Before he left, Andrew received a text from Mark. "Don't be charming, it'll scare them." Andrew laughed. For the first time in weeks, he laughed before an interview. The interview went well. Frank did not ask questions that made Andrew feel solace. He asked about people, about managing a team, about handling difficult customers, about what Andrew had learned after 15 years in a hardware store. Andrew answered honestly. He did not try to sound younger. He did not try to hide his age. He did not try to turn himself into the kind of person some company wanted him to be. 3 days later, Frank called. "We'd like to offer you the position." Andrew sat down in a kitchen chair. "Really?" Frank chuckled. "Really? Can you start Monday?" Andrew said yes. After the call ended, he sat there for a long time. Rachel hugged him from behind. Ben ran downstairs when he heard the news. The 3 of them held each other in the kitchen. Not every problem disappeared. Money still had to be watched. The hurt inside Andrew was not suddenly gone. But there was light. Afterward, Andrew texted Mark. "I got the job." Mark answered almost immediately. "Knew it. They were defeated by your good looks." Andrew wrote back, "Thank you for being there." This time Mark did not make a joke right away. After a little while he replied, "Always. The new job was not easy, but it was good." Frank gave Andrew time to learn the system. The employees began to respect him. Not immediately, but gradually. Andrew started waking up early again. He put on a clean shirt, carried the lunch Rachel packed for him, drove past roads where melting snow lined the shoulders. He still had days when he felt afraid. Some evenings, the old feeling came back. The feeling that he had lost a piece of confidence that would not be easy to recover. But this time, Andrew did not hide all of it. He told Rachel when a day was hard. He told Mark when the fear returned. And Mark, as usual, did not try to become wise. He only said, "Coffee?" A year later, on an early spring evening, Andrew hosted a small dinner in the backyard. Not a big party. Just Rachel, then Mark, Mark's wife Carol, and a few close friends. The snow had melted. The ground was still damp. The trees were beginning to show small green buds. Andrew grilled burgers. Mark stood beside him, criticizing the way he flipped them. You turned them too much. You once burned hot dogs until they looked like charcoal. That was a technique. Ben laughed. Rachel watched Andrew from the porch table. She saw him smile. Not the forced smile from the winter before. A real smile. After dinner, while everyone was sitting around the wooden tall outside, Andrew stood to get more drinks. Mark followed him inside to help. In the kitchen, it was just the two of them. Andrew opened the refrigerator, then said, "Hey." Mark was getting ice. "What?" Andrew looked at his friend. "I don't think I ever said it right." Mark looked up. "Oh no, are you about to be serious?" Andrew smiled. "Try to survive it." Mark set down the ice tray. Andrew said, "Last winter, I don't know if I would have gotten through it if you hadn't kept showing up." Mark looked down for a moment. Andrew continued, "Everyone was kind, but then they had their own lives to get back to. I understand that. But you kept coming back." He paused. "You didn't fix it, but you were there, and that helped more than you know." Mark was quiet. Then he said softly, "I knew you would have done the same for me." Andrew nodded. "Yeah, but I still wanted to say thank you." Mark looked at him. After a moment, he said, "All right." Andrew waited for a joke, but Mark did not make one. He only said, "I receive it." The two men stood there in the quiet kitchen. Outside, voices and laughter floated in from the backyard. Mark patted Andrew on the shoulder. "Now grab the drinks before I start crying like a very mature man." Andrew laughed. "No one wants to see that." Exactly. They carried the drinks outside, and the evening continued. Very ordinary, very human, and because of that, very beautiful. A few months later, Mark entered a hard season of his own. Not in the same way Andrew had, but heavy enough. Mark's mother was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. The woman who used to remember every child's birthday in the neighborhood had begun forgetting where she put her keys, whether she had turned off the stove, and sometimes the names of the people she had known for years. Mark, the man who joked about everything, began talking less. Andrew noticed. One evening, Mark canceled their usual baseball night. His message only said, "Not tonight." Andrew looked at the phone, then went to get his coat. Rachel asked, "Where are you going?" Andrew said, "Mark's house." "Didn't he say he didn't want to hang out?" "He said no baseball. He didn't say no chili." Rachel smiled. "Take the big container." Andrew went to Mark's house with chili. He knocked on the door. Mark opened it. His eyes were red. His hair was messy. "What are you doing here?" Andrew lifted the container. "Chili." Mark looked at him. "You stole my move." Friends don't need to be original. Mark looked at Andrew for a few seconds, then stepped aside and let him in. That night, they sat in Mark's kitchen. 2 bowls of chili. 2 cans of soda. No big answers. No perfect advice. Just 2 friends. One hurting, one staying. And Andrew understood, maybe more deeply than ever, that real friendship is not one person always being strong and the other always needing help. Real friendship is taking turns keeping the light on. When one person forgets the way, the other sits beside him. When one person grows tired, the other says, "I'm here." Not once, but again and again. Quietly. Ordinarily. Long enough for the other person to remember that he does not have to walk through the dark season alone. You know, I think when someone's life falls apart, they often do not need perfect words. They do not need someone standing outside their pain saying, "Everything will be fine." Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But in that moment, what they may need more is someone who is not afraid of their silence, Someone who does not disappear just because they do not know what to say. Someone who does not require them to become cheerful again, so the visit feels easier. Mark did not save Andrew with great advice. He did not immediately find him a job. He did not make the bills disappear. He did not fix the shame Andrew carried inside him. He simply showed up, brought food, sat down, walked with him in the cold, made a few ridiculous jokes, and stayed long enough for Andrew to remember that he was still a person worthy of love, even when he no longer knew who he was. That is a quiet kind of friendship. Not loud, not posted online, not built on grand promises, just this: I see that you are hurting, and I am not going anywhere. Maybe every one of us needs someone like that. And maybe, at some point, we can become that person for someone else. We do not have to fix everything. We do not have to say the perfect thing. Sometimes we only need to knock on the door, bring a bowl of soup, sit down, and let the other person know you are not alone. If today's story made you think of a friend who once stayed with you, someone who did not say much, did not make a lot of noise, did not turn their kindness into something dramatic, but was there when you needed them most, I hope you hold that memory gently. Maybe it was someone who called when you stopped answering messages, someone who brought food when you did not want to eat, someone who sat with you in silence, someone who was not afraid of the weakest version of you. If they are still in your life, maybe one day you can tell them, thank you for staying. And if today you know someone who is walking through a hard season, maybe you do not need to wait until you know what to say. Sometimes presence is already an answer. Thank you for sitting with me today. I truly appreciate it. Until our next story, take good care of yourself. And if there is a friend out there who is trying to act like they are fine, maybe all it takes is one small message. I'm here. This is Companion. Stories that remind us what truly matters.